Okay, gonna do a quick recap on today. Very frustrating day for me. Um, very similar to Friday, really, in how I felt. It was not an easy day to trade whatsoever for I think anybody, but in particular the strategies that require momentum and some kind of a move. The range on today as a whole was ridiculously small, pretty much as small as I've ever seen it. The high of day is at 17,000, 1225, and the low after the open was at 16,9, 4450. So that's a total range of less than 70 points, which is insane. It's not too surprising coming into the holiday period, but whenever we get these kind of days, honestly, I probably shouldn't really be taking that many trades. And as you can see by all the arrows on my chart, I did. I fortunately ended up just like Friday last week, pretty much break even on a day that I did make some mistakes in. I did miss some really good opportunities as well and just didn't trade particularly well. The positive I'm going to try and take out of it is that my trading for the past 7 days has been really pretty poor and I've broken even. So I'm a really big kind of believer in some of the things that Jared Tendler talks about in terms of how you improve, and one of those things is the inchworm model, which I will now crudely draw, um, whereby essentially we have our range of performance that looks like this, and this down here is our worst, this up here is our best, and then this is what we perform most of the time. And I would say recently, I've probably been trading in and around this kind of zone at a guess. Do that in a different color just so we can see. So I would say that I've been trading in this kind of zone. Hasn't been horrible. I haven't like tilted off and taken trades that I knew were mistakes in the moment and just went, I'm just going to take this trade because I can't, I don't care or anything like that, or I'm bored, so I'm going to take a trade. But I would say there are a lot of trades over this period where I could have I could have avoided them, and it's very tempting to compare that to how I was trading in the past before I started making any recap videos. Funnily enough, funny how that happens, right? And I was trading probably to the ability of being up here, like towards my best. It might have even been, you know, over here at my actual best. But if the back end of my game right now is breaking even, then it suggests that I've made a pretty big improvement. I would guess that right now, um, my performance has gone from maybe what this was, and the back of the inchworm has sort of moved up. To give you an idea of what that looks like, this is sort of like what it was. It's very flat. My best is miles better than my worst. And what has essentially happened is I've just got my worst has just got a little bit better. My best has probably also got a little bit better as well. So now I'm in this stage here. And this is really good because it means that, my old, between these 2 points was back here, and now I've made an improvement. So I am seeing this as I have made some improvement, and I, I'm looking at that in a positive manner. That being said, I still did not trade particularly well today. I'm going to go through the trades. I was a little bit unfortunate as well. We'll go through them. I'll give a spoiler real quick. My accounts are down by a tiny amount. There's more commissions, I think, than the P&L today. So it does mean that my live account is now below 52,000, which is a bit of a shame, and my eval is at 51,000. So they have pulled back a little bit over the last few days, but like I said, if this is my worst, then it's not the end of the world. And for me, the key thing is I look at my edge and my performance separately. My edge has still performed relatively well in these conditions. I haven't. And the good thing is that I can make improvement on myself, but it's difficult to improve on an edge that is already established. So yeah, lots of positives still. We'll go through today. I am keeping an eye on the potential for a trade. I am looking at possibly taking a short. It is a little bit late, but we've still got probably about half an hour, 40 minutes before I would stop trading. So if we do get a setup, I'll either trade that live or bin this recording off completely. We'll see. So right out the gate, we opened up and we pushed straight into pre-market highs, and I really like that as a potential. I was hoping we'd get below the 50 EMA sell-off. We didn't. Instead, we came back and we actually pushed to try and take out the high of day, and we got this really clean price action at the top, where, well, clean for me, where it kind of tries to go and then it begins going sideways. So this for me is a really good indicator that we can look for a short. And when we got below the 50 EMA, we got a really clean flag, and I got short on the break of that flag right in here at 16,970.75, and I took half the position out as we came down to the lower of that flag for around about 7 points and stopped out the rest for break even. And I would say this is pretty much a slam dunk trade for me. The only thing that I think was affecting me mentally early on was I was actually considering if it would be more profitable to take all of my position off at my first target. I've noticed that my risk reward on average is around about 1-to-1, very slightly better, and normally my first target is at 1-to-1. So I began to, consider that, and maybe my mind was trying to work overload thinking about that and trades at the same time. But that first trade, really well done. Second trade, so that low held this support level, and this is a pattern that I really like to see, particularly on days where we've got where we've already got a bit of bullish momentum on the daily chart. We are potentially extended, but recently we come back here, we can clearly see that the bulls have been in control for a while now. They're very, very strong. So when I see us dip into this support level, I was pretty, I wouldn't say excited, but I was pretty happy to look for a long instead. And what I essentially did was I took this high here and this high here that was starting to hold the 50 EMA, and I jumped in. And I think what happens here was I actually jumped in a tiny bit early. Realistically, I should have waited just a little bit longer, maybe got in at 1978. And if I'd got in at 1978, I'd have probably just set my stop at 1971 and not really thought about it. But because I got in a little bit early and it was wicking around and then it broke out, I took my stop, which originally was going to be down somewhere like this, around 69.50, and I actually moved it up to the low of this candle here because I thought that's where I'd probably risk to. And unfortunately, I got stopped out literally to the tick, which was really gutting. And I ended up taking a 6 point something loss, I think it was. So 12.5 in total. I got in at 977.50 and out at 971.25. So around about a 12.5 point stop because I take 2 positions. Really frustrating because we got that move. I would have taken some profit on that, moved my stop, probably not to break even, but would have at least made like 5 or 6 points on that. So pretty frustrating. But we then got another setup, and this one again, very clear A+ setup. We come down, we hold the 50 EMA. I got a good entry here. My stop was probably down here somewhere. Take the first bit out on this push up into the high of this resistance and the rest out for break even. Now these first 3 trades were all really well executed. We had a very clear reason for doing all of them. We've got a legitimate setup, and I would say that I executed them all really well for the entry side of things. The second trade I was pretty unlucky on, and what that meant at the time was I was pretty much break even for the day. Despite taking 3 trades that all worked and probably should have been up in the ballpark of 4, maybe 500 bucks. And that was playing on my mind a little bit. It was a little bit frustration. I noticed that when I get into that sort of mind frame, things are happening pretty quickly. I stop really thinking through things and realizing that we've got the whole day to trade. And we then came on to some kind of mistakes, I would say. So we end up putting in a pretty nice head and shoulder pattern here. So this is a pattern I really do like. I think it's definitely one to look bearish on. We come into that same whole area. So we've got our resistance. We sell off through the 50 EMA, and we pop back up to that 50 EMA. Now, at the time, I was actually doing something on the side with my journal. I was checking to see if I would be better off just taking all my profit off at my first profit target, which came to the conclusion it's very close. It's probably better to hold on to positions. It might be a case of like on a day where we've got this really tight range, I'm better just to take it all off. It might be a case of saying if I need a significant breakout, maybe take it off early. but it's pretty close, so it probably doesn't matter. That's the probably the key takeaway from that. And I realized that we'd come back into the 50 EMA, and I wasn't really fully prepared. So I was kind of scrambling at this point. I drew in a rough flag here and realized that my entry probably wanted to be around about 65, 66, and I kind of zoomed in, and it was, you know, drawing the lines became tough. It's all that sort of like when you're under pressure, logical thinking begins to close out. And honestly, I think the fact that we had this price action here, this sideways price action holding the support, I could have actually just said this actually looks pretty difficult, I'm going to skip this one. But we did take it, and as a result, I ended up taking two pretty quick losses. And I would say that the first trade I was in too early. I don't think I had enough of a signal yet. We can see that this trend line actually didn't get broken. You know, I thought it had done. I don't hate that I had that. But this is too quick, and this is something I try to avoid. If I get this really quick tag, getting in on the next candle when we've had this big cat, I don't know if I like or not. It may not be a horrible trade, but I feel like we were in a bit early. This entry here, very much in the middle of no man's land. It's not really a momentum entry, and I got stopped out straight away. So, bit unfortunate, maybe, that I looked over my screen in the wrong time. But I got in at 964.50 and out at 972.25. So around about a 16-point loss. And unfortunately, we then got straight back in, probably at the correct point here at 16,967.25. And to be fair, we did immediately give a move that gave around about 5.5 points. So I think that this entry was pretty good. Very similar to yesterday, actually. It gave that quick 5 points and then bounced. So I would say that this first trade was probably a mistake. Second trade, not so much, but even still, it still was a loss, getting in at 67.25 and out at 74.50. So I would say at this point, you know, I was very frustrated with myself. I didn't know the exact numbers, but to put it into perspective, I've probably like 16-point mistake here. This trade here where I took a 12-point stop rather than a 5-point win. That's another 17 points. All of a sudden, it's like that's 33 points worth of mistakes, which is $660. And I have no idea at this point how much I was down. I was probably down in the ballpark of 600 or so, maybe a little bit more than that. I'm not sure, but I was aware that I was down, and then I actually stepped away and then came back and realized that we were getting this big move here. And again, I actually screwed this trade up. I was a bit too emotional really to see things all that clearly, but I saw the situation. I was like, this is what I was waiting for. We've got this very nice support holding, and I actually mistakenly thought that this was the trigger here, this breaker 77.25. Realistically, this has not held the 50 EMA for long enough. The real entry would have been probably around here at 78.75 with a risk down to here. So keep in mind, this should have been the trade. I got in a little bit early, almost got stopped out immediately. Got incredibly lucky here. My stop was at 69.50. It came down to a low of 70.25. So I was super lucky here. And if I'd taken that loss, then I think my eval might have been pretty close to hitting the max drawdown, which would have been very frustrating, especially to then watch it move. But fortunately, that didn't happen. I took my first piece out for around about 5.5 points, and probably could have got a little bit more, but I was worried that the market isn't really cooperating in it's not trading the best ways possible. And if we just put in my entry and my stop, we can see my final target was in the ballpark of 17,000, and I get out at 16,990. And the pure reason for this was I was looking at my P&L and I went, I could take it off here and put myself only down like 170 or so, which feels pretty good compared to being down 400. And I didn't want to finish the trade being down 400, and the P&L thoughts took over, so I got out there. And that's another 10 points worth of mistakes. So we're up to now over 40 points worth of mistakes. Next trade, so we end up selling off. We hold this area for a really nice quick double bottom. We push up, and this is not a trade I'm particularly a fan of, but it does meet my criteria. It gets above the 50 EMA. and we get this really clean flag back to the 50 EMA. And I decided to jump in when we broke above this candle here, getting in at 16,993.25. My risk on this, I think I actually put it down to like here. It probably didn't need to be that far, if we're being honest. Probably could have just gone to like here or something like that. So if we had gone to say 87, which I think is a much more reasonable stop area, it's only 6 and a bit points, and that's a pretty small stop, but price action was just like that today. We get this move higher, and although this looks like it happened really quickly, this little sequence here felt like it wasn't really going. 17,000, big psychological number. So I actually took half of my position out pretty early for only about 5 points. And then when we pushed into the high of day, we rejected it, came back, took it out, rejected it. I just took it off for around about 12.5, 13 points on the last piece. Now, I didn't give back as much as I first thought when I realized, oh, I've got out really early here. I probably could have got another 4 or 5 points out of it, but it just goes to show this first exit probably a bit early, could have got a few extra points. This exit here, way too early, could have got a few extra points. We're now well beyond 50 points worth of errors. The next trade was probably the one trade that I really am not happy with. One trade I am really not happy with. We put in a nice area of resistance here. We essentially double top the high of day. We put in that nice sideways price action. So we've got the situation that I like to look for a short. And I got a little bit obsessed with the idea of this being a trade, selling off, giving us a really big move. And what I essentially found was that we got caught between these two ideas of it could be a long, could be a short, could be a long, could be a short, because we've actually held an area of support here. And I ended up, and if we just draw this in here to give an idea of what could have been potentially a winning trade, but I don't like either. We ended up in a situation where I drew, once we got back over 50 come back, I drew a trend line like this, which makes no sense because it completely ignores this wick of this candle here, which I shouldn't be doing. But also, price action where I got in, it hasn't really held under the 50 EMA, so I don't consider this a setup, when I look back. If we'd have held for another candle or two, then I think getting short here would have been fine on the break of 90, potentially, risking to, 99 or 17,000. I think that would have been an acceptable trade, but where I got in really wasn't, and as a result, we ended up taking another 8 points worth of loss. A little bit more on 2 contracts at 70. I think it was 17 points total loss, and now we're up to a point where we've probably made 70 points worth of mistakes, which is insane to do so. And then the final trade that I took, and I have missed one trade which we'll go through as well. Came into the same support area, really liked it, and again, I get in too early on this. This is a bit of a recurring theme where it gets over, it's one candle, I'm like, yeah, there's our hold, and that's just not an entry. And I get away with this one. I got in at 16,990 and 50 cent. I put my stop down at like 82.50, barely missed my stop. I actually moved it up a tiny bit. It then did pop, and I took half the position out. Again, a little bit early, 18,996, but I'm okay with that for around about 5.5 points, and the rest out when we took out this low. So all in all, just to point this out as well, if I had taken this trade accurately, should have waited for this hold here. I'd have got in at the exact same price. My risk would be a little bit clearer defined. I'd have probably had the same risk and would have got the exact same exits, although I might have actually gone for a tiny bit more given that it began pushing straight in my favor. So there was that. And then the one trade that I think the one trade I definitely missed was this here. So this high matched up really nicely with some resistance before. We got under the 50 EMA, began holding, and there was an opportunity to get in short here. And depending a lot on where my entry was, where my stop was, I'd have at least taken some profit here, and I might have even got the rest out when we came into this low. It's difficult to say without being in the trade. There was also one other potential maybe long, because we have now held this area. We did flag back to the 50 EMA, but by this point we were very much a case of it could be a long, could be a short. It's a complete mess, but could have been getting in around about 94, taken half out on this push up here into sort of like 17,000 area, and have the rest now at scratch. But like I said, we're actually setting up more for a short. So all in all, not my best performance by any stretch of imagination. I did make, like I said, at least 70 points worth of mistakes. So I need to kind of go away and figure out what that is. I would say that a big chunk of the mistakes were a result of P&L focus. You know, the trade that this trade in particular should never have been. These few early exits again shouldn't have happened, and that's what can happen when trading. We can get too emotional. So I need to work a lot on that. As for my edge, I think again it's a day where there was potential to make over $1,000, 50 points comfortably. So again, these sort of days I do feel like I've kind of thrown away an opportunity, but at the same time I go, I didn't perform very well at all and I broke even, which is a step forward in terms of overall performance, and my edge continues to show that it is pretty resolute and even in tough conditions can be profitable, which again is a pretty good sign. So I'm not sure if I will trade much again before the end of the year. Just so I've got a few things on between now and Christmas, and then the week between Christmas and New Year. I'm not really interested in trading all that much. I might get a trade here. If I do, then great. If not, oh well. But yeah, hope you have enjoyed this, had a better trading day than me, and I'll see you again in the next video.